Good evening. Thank you for joining the Ontario College of Teachers 2022 Annual Meeting of Members. Before we begin, I would like to share some housekeeping items. Please note that viewers will not be using their microphone or camera. The session will be held in English with simultaneous interpretation in French. To select your language of choice, please use the drop-down menu in the bottom left corner of your screen if you are joining using a computer or tablet. If you are on a smartphone, you will find this menu at the bottom of your screen. Closed captioning is also available through both the English and French channels. Please click on the captioning button to enable captioning. We will now begin the meeting. Please join me in welcoming the college's interim registrar and CEO, Chantal Bellil.
Annie, bonjour, Tanzi, Wache, bonsoir, and good evening. As the college's interim registrar and CEO, it's my honor to welcome you to the Ontario College of Teachers 2022 Annual Meeting of Members. Je me permets de faire une petite parenthèse pour reconnaître la journée.
To recognize that the Franco-Ontarian Day and the celebration of the Ontario Francophonie Day that took place on the 25th of September.
On which we gather for those at or near the college location is the traditional territory of the Wendat, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Métis, and Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. We know that many of you are joining us from ancestral lands around the province, and we thank you for bringing your hearts and minds to this college event and the college's mandate, which is to ensure the safety and well-being of students, promote the high standards of teaching in the profession, and support and maintain public confidence in the profession. Friday is Canada's second National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. Its establishment was among the 94 calls to action issued by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I hope you will join me in revisiting these calls to action and how we can work together to implement them in the spirit of friendship, peace, and respect. I'll touch a little more on this as the event unfolds. Tonight, I'll be providing you with a review of the college's operations over the past year. We will also hear directly from our Council Chair, Diana Miles, as well as our Audit and Finance Subcommittee Chair, Jonathan Davey. Following that, we'll answer your submitted questions. Le mandat de l'ordre consiste à servir le public en protégeant les intérêts.
The college's mandate is to serve the public by protecting the interests and well-being of all students enrolled in Ontario's publicly funded schools. The province's many diverse learning spaces are the anchor for carrying out this mission.
Teachers, which includes principals, vice principals, superintendents, directors of education, in their unique positions of trust, are leaders of those spaces. Over the past year, we've introduced student-focused resources that support the development of safer learning spaces. Following more than a year of consultation and collaboration with community stakeholders, our professional advisory on anti-Black racism was released in November 2021. It's a document that reinforces our commitment to diversity and inclusion, and I encourage my fellow OCTs to take some time to read it if you haven't already done so. We also successfully launched the online sexual abuse prevention program along with our partners at the Canadian Centre for Child Protection. Since the program went live at the beginning of January this year, more than 220,000 members of the college, as well as applicants, have completed it. I want to take this opportunity to thank all stakeholders for their actions to enable this extremely high rate of successful completion of this very important professional development. The program is an important proactive step towards keeping students safe, secure, and feeling supported. That sense of security now builds as every applicant completes the program, as it is now a requirement for teacher certification. The subject matter can be difficult for many people, we've heard. I have been heartened to hear from many members, including survivors, that the material was helpful and handled with care. With your indulgence, I would like to just share one of those testimonials with you. It begins, "Dear College, I'm a member, and I'm writing to let you know how thankful I am to have completed the Child Sexual Abuse Prevention Program this September 2022. This was by far the most important and well-organized training workshop I have ever done in my entire teaching career, and I'm grateful to the OCT for prioritizing this for its members. The training program was organized, engaging, heartfelt, and extremely important. For those of us who work daily with children, we are in the strongest position to help stop one of the worst things that can ever happen to a child, their family, and our entire community. Thank you to all of you who've shared your thoughts on this program. It's been very valuable to receive. Finally, I'd like to also discuss another major initiative that's currently under development. We know that the college has struggled to meet targeted timelines for some services, including certification. Some members and applicants have experienced extensive wait times for responses to their phone calls and emails. We've heard you, and I offer sincere thank you for your patience and your understanding. On September 15th of this year, I provided Council's Governing Council with an executive summary of a proposed action plan to expedite certification and enhance the overall experience members and applicants have with their interactions at the college. This proposal follows already implemented investments and process enhancements, yet requires further investments in our membership services department, as well as in our information technology infrastructure. These new investments, as well as the redeployment of existing resources, focus overwhelmingly on improving services such as certification. I'm happy to report that we've already achieved results. For instance, delays in certifying Ontario graduates and converting temporary certificates have been largely eliminated. The proposed plan is a sustainable and cost-effective continuation of these efforts that is built on strategies that solidify and build upon these results, all without diminishing our duty to ensure that students are served by those who meet high standards of training, competence, and professionalism. Nous croyons fermement que l'établissement et le maintien de ces normes
believe that the establishment and the maintenance of these norms will constitute additional work to ensure that the advantages or the long-term advantages for the 2 million students that were registered
between members of the profession and members of the public. It's also the first to be led by our chair, Diana Miles. Diana is a lawyer and the Chief Executive Officer of the Law Society of Ontario, where she's honed her expertise on regulatory governance over 20 years with the Law Society organization. I've seen that expertise on display at the 4 council meetings that we've had since her appointment. Diana's efficiency and diligence is remarkable, and her careful council stewardship models best practice within good governance principles. Diana, I want to personally thank you for your excellent stewardship of our new governance model, and the floor is yours.
A steady hand as it evolves to meet the challenges of today's education ecosystem on behalf of the public and the profession. And I'd like to thank you and your team for your dedication and the excellent work. As a lawyer and a CEO of the Law Society of Ontario, I had a keen interest in the college's restructuring initiative. The promise was that a competencies-based selection process for council, equally balanced between the public and the profession, would attract highly qualified candidates and better reflect Ontario's wealth of diversity. The additional promise was that a smaller and balanced council would be more efficient and effective in delivering the governance oversight that the public expects, while leaving the day-to-day regulatory work to specialized committees and rosters made up of Ontario certified teachers and members of the public. Though we're still early in our tenure, I am pleased to say that those promises are being fulfilled. Like many other Ontario regulators, the college navigated significant challenges over the past 2 years. This organization also had to adapt to a changing regulatory landscape. Adaptation is often accompanied by competing tensions. Unfortunately, many members and applicants have felt the impact through their experience dealing with the college's service delays. The work to eliminate the delays began before my appointment, and Council has been fully briefed on actions taken so far. One area of interest is expedited licensure of teachers. The college is proposing an action plan with innovative recommendations that would build upon already implemented enhancements, as well as improve the overall member and applicant experience. Teaching is a career with unique challenges and unique rewards. The college's mandate is to ensure that only qualified applicants are certified to hold such a trusted position. It's a mandate that demands rigor and diligence. Every step towards efficiency must be taken with care. There is no room for compromise when it comes to regulating professional standards for learning spaces. I want to be clear that Council's top priority is ensuring that the college is equipped with the capacity and the resources to deliver on its promises, and to do so in a way that provides value to members while maintaining the standards required of a profession that is so vital to our future. Council is also committed to pursuing this priority with the transparency expected of all organizations tasked with protecting the public interest. Our meetings are held online and they're open to the public. If you'd like to view a future council meeting, I'd encourage you to visit the college website at oct.ca to view our calendar and to register to attend. If you're unable to attend, our meeting minutes and our summaries are posted to the website. We are working on behalf of the public, and the public deserves to see how that work is done. Of course, the public is not just invited to observe this work. Qualified members of the public, as well as qualified Ontario certified teachers, are invited to participate by applying for a role on council, on committees, or on rosters. Vacancies for each will be filled on a cyclical basis for terms of 2 years, and I can personally attest that the work is rewarding and very illuminating. We all have a stake in Ontario's publicly funded education system. It is only fitting that we all have an opportunity to have a say. So if you're interested in learning more about how you can have that say, please visit the college website for information about required qualifications and how you can apply. Now, before I introduce one of my council colleagues who stepped up to answer that very call, I'd like to close by saying thank you. Thank you to all teachers, including those who serve with me on council, for their dedication to Ontario students. We are lucky to have one of the strongest education systems in the world, and Ontario certified teachers are leaders of those spaces. Your dedication does not go unnoticed, and it certainly does not go unappreciated. It is an honor and a privilege for me to contribute to your profession and to student success in any way that I can. Now, if you'll please join me in welcoming my fellow council member, Jonathan Davey. Jonathan is a Vice President of Indigenous Financial Services with Scotiabank, where he helps lead a national strategy that develops community-based partnerships that focus on wealth management as well as personal and commercial banking. Jonathan also chairs the Audit and Finance Subcommittee of Council, and it is on their behalf that he will be providing you with a financial update today. So Jonathan, I'll turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Diana, both for that introduction and the leadership that you've shown as Chair of Council. And I'd also like to echo your thanks to Chantel, who has shown similar leadership and professionalism to myself and the rest of Council, as she's brought us up to speed on what's been a very busy time for the college. And that includes plans for another busy time that's just around the corner. The role of the Audit and Finance Subcommittee is to monitor and report to Council on the financial activities of the college. We also recommend to Council an annual budget, the appointment of an auditor, and the annual audited financial statements. In addition, the subcommittee acts as the audit committee of the college for the purpose of reviewing the annual audit scope, audit fees, and audit findings. As subcommittee chair, I'm pleased to take part in this annual meeting of members. Change and adaptation have been recurring themes this evening, and my duties include ensuring that the college has the resources required to execute these adaptive changes as efficiently as possible. Efficient resource allocation requires stable financial foundation. And according to the results of KPMG's 2021 audit, The college's finances are presented fairly and represent the financial position of the college for a year ended December 31st, 2021. Of note was the 2021 year-end deficit of $1,413,670, which required a draw from cash reserves. The need to maintain a stable cash reserve is addressed in the 2023 budget proposal. On September 15th, Council received a briefing on the proposed 2023 budget and will make a final decision at its December 8th meeting. The subcommittee is aware of the service demand and certification challenges facing the college after 2 years of disruption due to the pandemic, a tightening labor market, and the introduction of new registration categories and requirements. The proposed 2023 budget funds core programs and adds new staff and technological investments to address workload pressures and improve service response times. The proposal also reinvests in cash reserves to ensure the college remains on stable financial footing. Of note is the fact that the college revenues are a stable funding source. However, they have remained flat over the past few years, requiring draws from reserves to fund programs. The college has reallocated resource and right-sized in several operation areas, but the work is not yet done. At a 1,290 to 1 ratio, the college has the highest member to staff ratio amongst 38 health and non-health regulators in the province. But the college also has the second lowest annual membership fee, a clear disconnect that manifested in longer than normal wait times and service levels. The college has moved to a hybrid work environment, and an emphasis on technology-enabled self-serve options for members and applicants are clear examples of positive change. College management is also exploring approaches to occupancy planning that improve the hybrid workspace. And finally, I would like to close by thanking my fellow Audit and Finance Committee members for their contributions this year, specifically my Vice Chair, Valerie Williamson, Maria Bassinelli, Professor Jonathan Rose, and our Council Chair, Diana Miles. Now, I believe we have time to answer questions submitted by members in advance of the meeting today. Thank you.
So thank you, Jonathan. We're gonna, oh, there we go. I wanted to wait for the chair to arrive. So Jonathan, before we commence in that section of the questions that members of the public, members, applicants have submitted, we mentioned earlier the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation that's coming on Friday. And so given your current role, I thought it would be interesting that we just invite you to speak about that day's meaning, given the nature of what you are doing and probably had to prepare for. And I think you've been very busy over the last month.
Well, thank you, Chantel, and thank you for this opportunity. The National Day for Truth and Reconciliation is a day to remember those Indigenous children who didn't make it home from residential schools and acknowledge the intergenerational trauma that the schools continue to cause. We can't work towards reconciliation without first knowing the truth. And the truth starts with education. And who better equipped to provide that education than our teachers? Our teachers are, as teachers, you're in a unique position to increase students' understanding about what happened at residential schools. It's certainly not an easy task to take on, but it's an extremely important one. So on Friday, the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, I respectfully ask that you please think about the important role that you have in shaping the minds of generations of students so that they may be knowledgeable and respectful about Indigenous cultures, histories, traditions, and languages. The National Day for Truth and Reconciliation is a day of singular focus on what should be a year-long effort. So again, Chantal, I say Naiwen, and thank you.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts on that topic. I appreciate how you also highlighted the alignment of education with the Truth and Reconciliation efforts. So very appropriate given the context of our evening this evening, the event this evening. So thank you. And I also want to thank everyone for submitting your questions ahead of this event. And we have many questions to address this evening. So let's get started. Just please know that answers to your questions that we are unable to get to this evening will be posted on our college website in the coming weeks, along with a recording of this evening's meeting. We'll also have those translated. So our first question, and we'll Just as a heads up, the questions are either operational, and I would respond to those, or governance related questions, and I invite Jonathan or Diana to respond to those. So the first one's coming from a member. And the question is, what remedies will the college provide to its members for its failure in providing fundamental services required of it by legislation over the last many months? Second part of this question, how will the college ensure it can come into legislative compliance and provide these services now and in the future? So thank you to staff for putting that as our first question, a very difficult question in light of the service delays that our membership and our applicants have experienced, but we acknowledge that those delays have occurred, and we're looking towards efficiencies. And as both Diana and Jonathan spoke in their comments, we've already provided an action plan to address those, in addition to everything we've been doing over the last couple of years to address those as well. What I can add further is that over the past 12 months, we've dedicated resources to solving these issues and have achieved gains. We have achieved gains. The college submitted proposal to council details not only a cost-effective but also sustainable approach, so that we can solidify and build on what the gains we've already made. So we're looking at improvements across the organization. So thank you for that question. Our next question is sent by a newcomer to Ontario. So our question is, I landed in Canada as a permanent resident from India last month, and I want a college certificate. So what are my qualification criteria? So thank you for reaching out. We've received several questions of that nature from internationally educated teachers asking about how they can become certified. So that's very encouraging. We're pleased to be able to respond to those. The most effective way for you to become or to get information about that would be to look at specific advice that would be on our college website. It would be under on the OCT.ca website, clicking under Becoming a Teacher on that website. In addition, we have a similar question. I'll speak to this one in French. Je suis arrivée au Canada le mois dernier.
I'll have another one. Here's I revived in Canada last year. I'm a permit and I have an RP. I would like to receive a certification from the college. So it's very similar to the answer that I provided earlier. We received many questions regarding the certification process. So the way in order to send in your request, you need to visit our website. So OCT.ca and then you'll click on the option Becoming a Teacher. So there will be information, virtual information centers that are set out for the month of October. So therefore, you'll be able to find information regarding on our website.
In English with a similar question, in addition to going to our website relating to information on how to apply for certification, we also will be hosting some information sessions virtually. And so information relating to those, time and date, can be found on our website, and that information will be posted shortly, and those should be towards the end of October. So another question from an applicant. I submitted my document and was trying to find out whether the document has been received, and no response was received. Thank you. So again, similarly aligned with the some challenges in reaching our staff, but what I can offer is that applicants, you can monitor your status of your application, including any documentation that might still be required, by going to the applicant status page on the college website. And what's important to note is even if you try and reach a college staff member, they only have access to the same information that you can gain on visiting your applicant status page on the college website. So it's a self-serve option, and that we encourage you to use in that regard. Jonathan, I believe this question will be best suited for you. I'm going to ask that, and then I'll invite you to respond. Is there a planned increase for the annual OCT membership fee? If so, what are these fees going towards? Is there a new, and I think there's a word missing, a new for a downtown OCT office location in a post-COVID world, considering the high cost of real estate in downtown Toronto? So Jonathan.
Thanks, Chantel. So I did touch on this earlier in the remarks, but I can explain a little bit further about the office space. I'll start by saying that the college recently commissioned a thorough review of office-related expenditures, and through that review, it was determined that staying in the location is the most cost-effective of the current options. However, this is something that we're going to continue to carefully examine when it comes to looking at our office space requirements. And as the college adapts to a new hybrid work arrangement, we'll continue to assess the options.
So thank you, Jonathan. We have been sensitive to that, as Jonathan points out, management looking at that over the last 2 to 3 years. Council has been requesting updates on that. We've been providing it. So our next question is also from a member. Would the college consider opening locations in suburbs like Mississauga and Markham, where applicants can submit their applications and get further information? This would promote employment to retired teachers and newcomers who may have trouble reaching the head office. So interesting question. I have to say pre-COVID, that was a comment that had been circulated. I have to first suggest that the primary source of college revenue is our annual membership fee. So as such, we monitor our expenditures very carefully. So opening or facilitating alternative office locations is just not within the scope of our current budget. Having said that, even exploring that opportunity, I would suggest that at this stage, we've transitioned to a virtual environment to support services, including application process. And so this allows us to provide equity of access to all members, to the active members and applicants, to our services in that regard. But in addition to the online services, you can mail your documentation to the college. Our address is on the website, 101 Bloor Street, downtown Toronto. But you can also deposit it. We have an in-person drop box at our offices. So that those would be some opportunities for you to be able to provide us with the documentation. And I'll just confirm again. So if you need additional assistance to what is provided virtually, self-serve on our website, you can contact the college's membership services department. Our email at info@oct.ca, or by phone, there's the 416-961-8800, and there's also the 1-888-534-2222, and that last number, the 1-888 number, is a toll-free number within Ontario. And so our next question is coming from an applicant. So how can the college make the application process faster? Is international application processing time the same as local applicants? So what I can offer in terms of a response, we're urging all applicants to apply as soon as possible. And we don't need all of your documents at the same time. So if you have some documentation, or you can initiate the establishment of your applicant status page in that regard. And if you can't, so the college can't actually start processing your application until we receive all of your documentation. That also includes the application fees that relate to your application. So in that regard, please apply as soon as possible. You don't need all of your required documents all at once. However, before we can start processing your application, we need all of your documents. And of course, as mentioned previously, please go to your applicant status page and look at the status of any documents required in that regard. There was also the question of the application times. Was there a distinction between Ontario applicants versus international applicants? So our target timelines for Ontario applications is approximately 30 days, and our target processing timeline for international educated teachers is 120 days. What could be some of the reasons for that differentiation in processing times is the difference between having an Ontario institution already accredited as opposed to receiving documentations from applicants that come from other jurisdictions. So we might need to translate documentation. We might need to authenticate some of the documentation from those issuing institutions, just as some examples. Our next question is from a private school teacher. So the the question. So I've been a teacher with a private school for more than 6 years, and I've taught abroad as well. I understand there's a teacher shortage in most areas of Ontario. Are there any programs that could be offered for experienced teachers to help them fill the teacher gap without having to go through the supply list? So that's an interesting question, and thank you for raising that. In Ontario, you must be a certified member in good standing with the college to be eligible to teach in the Ontario's publicly funded school system. All college certificates, including temporary certificates, certificates with conditions, transitional certificates, are all equal. They have the same force. They all allow you to seek and be offered employment. However, that being said, hiring decisions are outside of the college's mandate, outside of our scope as Ontario's teaching regulator. Any questions you may have relating to hiring practices, in addition to supply list questions, all should be redirected to employers such as school boards. We have another question about certification and qualifications. How does the college review completed evaluations from international or interprovincial bodies if there's an error made in the qualifications provided? So that's an interesting question. I can't provide you a response. It's pretty much tailored to your individual situation. However, our membership services team can assist applicants from any jurisdiction that may require additional support in addressing these types of issues or barriers or roadblocks. So please reach out, and I've suggested earlier was at info@oct.ca. Another question from an applicant. En français, merci de nous donner l'opportunité de nous exprimer.
Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to express ourselves. So right now, I just have 2 points of concerns. Knowing if the status of a member of the college of the OCT confers the authorization to work in all Canadian jurisdictions or only in the Ontario. And the second part of the question is to know if the college offers some professional training courses. So thank you very much for the question. So the members are only of the college are only authorized to teach in schools that are financed by professional funds. However, there's several territories or jurisdictions that recognize the qualifications and training. So we invite you to reach out to the regulating body or the Ministry of Education of the jurisdiction where you seek employment. They will be the best position to respond to your questions. Now, regarding you have the question about continuous training. So we have retraining courses, but we don't really offer the qualifications. We are not a supplier. We are the agency that accredits individuals, and we certify suppliers that can provide those services.
Of the public. Are permanent residents eligible for OSAP, which is Ontario Student Assistance Program? Is college enrollment funded by OSAP? So if I understand correctly, as we prepared, staff preparing the response, the Ontario College of Teachers is Ontario's teaching regulator, a mandate to protect public interest by certifying qualified teachers and accrediting teacher education programs, as I was just mentioning. We do not offer our own pre-service teacher education courses. That's often a misconception, I think, due to our name, because of our environment, our sector in education. Having the College of Teachers is misleading in terms of that regard. We are Ontario's teaching regulator, and so we do not offer pre-service teacher education programs or in-service additional qualification programs. We accredit, we approve of providers, however, we don't offer. A list of those providers of the accredited programs and the additional qualification programs can be found on our website. The next question was also submitted by a member of the public. Is there any scholarship program to study at or in this college? Yet again, so an example of how our name must be misleading. We do not offer courses. We're not a course provider. We regulate the profession, and our mandate is licensing teachers, accrediting programs, and setting the standards. If you wish to learn more about eligibility for a scholarship that we do offer to teacher candidates in approved institutions of pre-service education, you can go to our website, oct.ca, under the Becoming a Teacher tab and under Scholarship. The next question has two parts and comes from an applicant. So what services and resources does OCT offer to teachers applying outside Ontario regarding out of Ontario license application? And the second part to this individual's question, what are the time frame, eligibility, and process for new graduates with temporary certificates to obtain a permanent OCT certificate? So what I can offer is that Ontario certified teachers seeking certification or licensure outside of Ontario have to contact that jurisdiction's licensing body or that jurisdiction's Ministry of Education for information about their application process. In many cases, however, you might require a statement of professional standing. So in that case, then you would go to our college website under the e-services portal, so self-serve, and you would request a statement of professional standing. For the second part of that question relating to temporary certificates, these are automatically converted into general certificates, so that certificate of qualification registration without any conditions is an automatic process. What is required is that you provide, or that the issuing institution provides, proof of successful completion of your teacher education program. And as such, you provided some information of being a candidate at a teacher education program for your temporary certificate. Now you must close the loop and provide proof of certificate or successful completion of a teacher education program to then receive or transition that temporary certificate into a general certificate. It's your responsibility as the temporary certificate holder to trigger or make the request to that issuing institution to send that information, that proof of successful completion, to the college. Oh, and just to point out, also we should receive that proof of successful completion prior to your temporary certificate's expiry date. Diana and Jonathan, bear with me. I'm sure there's other governance questions coming. I'm looking forward to that. So in order to keep, so another question, this one's from a member. In order to keep my membership in good standing, do I need to take the sexual abuse prevention program? And what is the deadline and how do I access it? Interesting. Thank you for that question. So you do not need, as a member, to complete the sexual abuse prevention program to keep your membership in good standing. However, you must, it is a requirement that you complete the program. What is changing is the notation on your profile page on the public register. So prior to September 15th, which was the deadline for completion of the program, the notation was to be completed. Now post deadline, the notation, if you have not completed it, is incomplete. And the notation upon successful completion will read completed. And so there's no issue in that regard. You can easily access the program by going on to the members area on the college website. You register, and as soon as you successfully complete the program, there's an automatic trigger to change that notation on your profile page and on the public register to say completed. And given the high success of completion rate and given the great testimonials we receive, I really encourage folks to complete that as soon as possible. For those who have not. A governance question. Yay. So Diana, I'm going to turn this one over to you. I am a former governor of the Ontario College of Teachers. Needless to say, I completely disagree with the governor appointment process. The government decided after input that the lack of teacher interest in elective governance warranted change. The onus should have been on the college to promote elective representation to the members. And now do we know? Now we do not know who selects whom and why to govern this profession. So Diane, I'm sending that over to you.
Thanks, Chantel. Great question. Now at the college, the selection and nominating subcommittee of the council is responsible for reviewing applications from individuals who wish to serve on either the council, on committees, or on rosters. The selection and nominating committee's recommendations are then approved by council as well. And these recommendations are guided by a competency matrix that has been developed and that can be found on the college's website at ocd.ca, as Chantal's mentioned. It is interesting to note that under this particular model, we received a significant increase in member engagement. We had over 600 applications received versus just over 60 members applying under an election process. And this despite the college's attempts and investment under the previous model to promote participation in the elections. I think it's also important to note that the model stems from recommendations from an external governance expert, and that the recommendations were actually endorsed by the 8th Council. I would suggest that it was with great foresight that the 8th Council actually chose to be leaders in regulatory modernization and move forward with this governance decision, because we're now seeing the same changes unfolding across many jurisdictions.
So thank you. Agreed. The next question comes from a member. What was the rationale for early dissolution of previous council? Elimination of the 6 months remaining in council's term appears to have substantially delayed many processes under its mandate, such as investigations and hearings, due to the specialized training required for service on such committees. The dissolution date was a surprise to council. Therefore, transitions were not planned. Please provide comparative timelines for investigations and hearings pre and post dissolution. You know, Diana, I think that's maybe a question you and I can both provide some information on. There seems to be some misinformation. So let's try and clarify that.
Sure. So let me start, Chantal. The timeline for that council dissolution was in fact later than anticipated, and those who were elected and appointed to the 8th Council knew that they would be serving a shortened term. Chantal, I think I'll hand it over to you to respond to the investigations and hearings part of this question.
Yes, so there's asking about delays. So I think during that sole transition period, those couple of months where the one council was dissolved, we had a couple of months where there was some delays as we got the transitional rosters up and running. But since then, you know, the services and the efficiencies that were promised have really come to fruition, and our cyclical or our quarterly registrar's report advises council on that front. One specific data point that I can share, because we specifically asked about investigations and hearings, is that in 2021, the college held a record number of hearings, 140 hearings, which is unprecedented for the college. And it was really due to this new model where we, the discipline committee and the fitness to practice committees were more nimble in this new model. And we just have a smaller committee, but a significant number of rosters. So we're a robust roster that supports the work of an independent committee from the council. So in terms of 140 hearings, in previous 2 years ago, year and a half ago, we had approximately over 300 matters waiting for a hearing date. Now we have approximately 100, which is really the benchmark now for us, and it's really linked to how many matters would be referred from an investigation committee to the discipline committee. So really great strides in that regard under this model. So I'm going to, I believe, possibly turn this next question over to Diana. I believe it's governance. When will there be a review of the number of non-teacher members of the executive? Will this review involve any consultation with actual teachers in good standing? Also, will there be a review of the fact that members no longer go through a voting process? So many components to that question. Over to you.
Okay, thanks, Chantal. There are several publicly available reviews that affirm the effectiveness of the college's new governance model. And that includes a governance review of the Ontario College of Social Workers and Social Service Workers that was conducted by top consultants Harry Caton and Deanna Williams as well. This new structure also aligns with the modernized principles of right touch regulation, which was recently introduced by the UK's Professional Standards Authority. And as I mentioned earlier, we are seeing governance change in regulatory authorities across the board now in numerous jurisdictions, and they're all following this similar protocol.
Thank you. Diana, may I add, maybe if anyone's interested in seeing the individuals that sit either on council, on committees, and on roster, individuals can just go check our website. If you go under About the College, under Council and Committees roster, you'll see everyone who's been appointed to those various areas of governance activity. Another question, this one from a member. I am a retired teacher who maintains membership. What services are specific for me? Why is my fee the same as that for working members? What I can offer is that the college member fee is the same across the board for all of our members, whether retired or active. And like all college members, you have access to services that are funded by our revenue stream. One such service I would suggest or mention is the Margaret Wilson Library Services that is operating with great success virtually. It operated all through the pandemic. It provides resources. It forwards resources to membership. It has hard copy, but it also has an enormous volume of e-resources for the membership. So that would be one area that you could access as a retired member as well as a practicing member. And our quarterly registrar's report also provides updates in that service area. Another question comes from a member. Why are teachers with a history of mistreating staff and students still allowed to teach? What does it take to get them removed from a school board or lose their license? So I can just confirm the college takes concerns of members very seriously. Provincial legislation has a requirement for employers to report. It's called a duty to report about professional conduct. This includes mistreatment of students, and they have to report to the college in that regard. This duty to report is our primary source of complaints and concerns. Members of the public, other members of the profession can also file a complaint against a member, and they can do so by contacting the college's Investigations and Hearings Unit. And you can find more information about that also on our college website. I'm trying to think, I believe that would be, if you scroll, you should be able to easily to find where you would find that information. And there's also on our top right corner a search engine. And so you can certainly put in complaint in that search engine and you'll be able to, that will lead you to the proper landing page. Next question from a member. So I would like to know if supply pay could be increased. When a supply has to travel to other regions, fuel economy is not compatible. And I could certainly understand your concern in that regard. Unfortunately, as mentioned previously, any employment related questions, hiring, supply list is all outside the scope or the jurisdiction of the college. We are the regulator. We do not deal with any questions relating to hiring practices or remuneration or supply policies practices. Our last question also comes from a member. What are we doing to prepare students for the impacts of climate change? So again, another question that allows me an opportunity to clarify the college's mandate as Ontario's teaching regulator. We do not have jurisdiction over curriculum that is taught in the classroom. Any questions relating to curriculum are best addressed by the Ministry of Education in that regard. And so just to reiterate some of the jurisdictional questions we've received, the college does not have jurisdiction over employers. We cannot respond to employment related questions. We don't have jurisdiction over curriculum. We would redirect those questions to the Ministry of Education in that regard. And we don't offer programs of pre-service or additional qualifications. However, we accredit those programs and qualifications, and we also approve of the providers that can offer those. So those were the questions that we collated from everything that was forwarded earlier in the week and last week. And we want to thank everyone for forwarding those questions. it was not very active on the audit and finance front for questions for Jonathan, but thank you so much for being prepared in any event to respond to those. But I'm going to bring the event to a close. And for those whose questions we did not get to, we maybe not receive in time to prepare, please be aware that we'll collate all those questions, even the ones we haven't addressed this evening. We'll provide responses to all those questions, and those will be posted on our website. They'll be translated as well. So give us a short time frame, and we'll have those up for you. I want to thank Diane and Jonathan again for being with us, and thank you to everybody who joined our third virtual annual meeting of members this evening. Miigwech, good night, et bonne nuit, bonne soirée à tous.